Hey everybody, so I just wanted to jump on here today and leave my review for Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. Did I like this book or did I dislike this book? You will find out. You may have noticed a little pattern I have going here. Every book or two that I read, I somehow return to the works of Colleen Hoover. There's something about her writing style that has somehow lured me in enough to want to keep going and see what else she has to offer. That isn't to say that I find her to be the most original voice, but there is something oddly refreshing about the way she writes, something very engaging, very, very cheesy for the most part, but yet I am also very hooked to some degree. And yet I always want to know what else she's going to write about. Because I think underneath a lot of that cheesiness, it is rooted with some human emotion. There's always like an air of mystery, a really dark personal subject matter that is to be found at the core. And I like that she's able to kind of intertwine all of that together. So yeah, Colleen Hoover, I've kind of jumped on the train like everybody else, and there's a reason why she is still showcased at every bookstore known to man. So let's just kind of jump into this one now. A quick little backstory about what this is about. This follows two people, a young woman named Tate, who is a nurse, moving to San Francisco and lives with her brother, kind of starting like her new job. And her brother is a pilot. Her brother has a friend that is also a neighbor by the name of Miles, who is also a pilot. And these two meet not exactly under, the greatest of circumstances. He is drunk, passed out on the doorstep when she first arrives. It's not off to a good start. But as they start to get to know each other and the very, very little information that Miles, his character, is able to give us, she just kind of falls for him in a way that she didn't expect. She thought the last thing that was going to happen to her was fall for this individual, especially one that's very guarded, keeps to himself, and doesn't really have a lot to offer. Very much in the Colleen Hoover tradition, we kind of read it from two different narratives. So what I like about a book is that if the narrator is interesting enough to read for the entire duration, that's a good sign. If the narrator is boring or someone that you're not really connecting with, it can make it very hard for you to read. I think with this one, it was a little, a little bit of a struggle for me to want to keep reading because I just wasn't as engaged as I am with her other works that I've already read and reviewed. But we do get to split it into different parts and read from different perspectives. So it kind of makes it a little bit more refreshing for you to be able to go, okay, I can take a breather from this narrator and focus on this one now. Because all throughout the book, we're kind of learning mostly about Tate's character, and we do learn about Miles from the past. This is constantly cutting back 6 years prior, so we get an understanding of why he is so, guarded and closed off. But for the most part, just kind of reading about their, mutual attraction, their interest in one another, and for their own reasons as to why. It just wasn't as engaging for me. I didn't find either of their characters particularly that interesting. Now, of course, if this were adapted and made into like a show or a movie, I'd eat it up right away. But I think a lot of people might agree, and I would love for you guys to drop your comments down below if you've already read this book on what your thoughts were. Were you as engaged as her other works? Were there other works of hers that, were similar, where you're like, this is so good, it's good as that one? Because after reading It Ends With Us and It Starts With Us, I was definitely more engaged with those characters more than the ones here. I know it's a completely different book, a different series, but I was hoping to find like that same interest and engagement with these two, and I just couldn't. If anything, I thought by far from the works that I've read by her, these are probably my least favorite narrators. Now, it isn't to say that overall the book is bad. There were good points about it, and there were things that I enjoyed, but the book definitely loses itself for me personally, and just becoming so much of an erotica novel. I was like, man, these characters have a lot of sex, and there's nothing wrong with having sex and having your characters have lots of that scene, but it's just, at one point I just kind of, got disinterested. It wasn't even fun for me to read anymore because that's all the book, for me, kind of became. And if you notice, the book is really short. You can read this rather quickly. But that aside, that's kind of like my biggest criticism for it, is that I don't think it needed as much of that description as it gave us. That isn't to say that, of course, this isn't realistic, because I'm sure people are like that all the time. But at the same time, it just was something for me that didn't really appeal. And I would have loved to have known more about their backstories. Less of the sex and more about who they are. I would have loved to have known more about. We do get, a good sense of who they are as the book, carries out, but just not enough in my opinion. It was just one of those books that after I read it, yeah, maybe one day I would read it a second time, but it's very, very unlikely. But I am curious still. Like, again, I finished it. It wasn't a book that I put down and said, do not finish. I know there are a lot of those works. So that speaks for something. However, I don't think this is going to be the book that is the most memorable to me. It's fresh in my mind right now, but it may not be the book in a year's time where I go, oh yeah, that one. It may be one that I kind of forget about. But that being said, I still do look forward to reading more of Colleen Hoover's works, because even with this one not being my favorite, it has still left, an open window for me to want to explore what else she has to offer. So yeah, I'd be curious, like I said, to know what your guys' thoughts were on Ugly Love if you've read it. And just in general, your thoughts on Colleen Hoover and the other works that she's put out. What books do you like of hers the most? Which ones are not like your personal favorites? I'd love to know, because I am looking to pick up another copy of a Colleen Hoover work at some point, because I gotta admit, I am just very intrigued and somehow entertained by what she has to offer. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for listening. Can't wait to hear what you have to say, and I'll catch you next time.